Man removing bricks discovers a huge hidden surprise behind them. Nearly every home has at least one small quirk, a little something for the homeowner to complain about. Maybe the bedrooms are too small or the window sills when you open them, or maybe the living room floor is slightly tilted. Over time these quirks become so familiar that homes wouldn't seem the same without them. That's not quite the case if your quirky characteristic happens to be something alive. When a Tennessee pest control specialist received a call about a strange noise coming from the kitchen wall, he assumed that it would be just another average workday. No sooner had he removed the first brick, he made the most startling discovery of his career in September. A family had started to hear strange noises coming from within their walls. They assumed at first that some animal had escaped the coming winter and was nesting in the wall to stay warm. As the seasons changed and spring came, again the noises never went away. In fact, they got louder and more intense. The family decided that this must be some sort of insect, so they bought a bug medicine and fumigated the kitchen. When the pesticide failed to banish the bugs, the family called professional exterminator pest expert David Glover. David had years of experience and was confident that he could handle whatever was humming away inside of the wall. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to find arriving at the home. David made a quick examination of the exterior wall and discovered a small gap between the kitchen and window. The brick as well as a space between the bricks in the wall. He assumed that these small openings had allowed pests, whatever they were, to enter the home. David decided to use his infrared camera to search for the heat signatures of the creatures, trying to estimate the size of whatever was inside the wall. He was stunned at the result. Whatever had lodged within the house was huge. As a precaution, David decided to spray a natural insect repellent through the rest of the area to keep the insects confined in the kitchen wall. And in case he might be dealing with lethal stinging insects, used smoke to sedate them as well. Then he began wiping the weep hole so that he could see what was inside. As soon as David pulled the first brick off the wall, he was able to confirm that the pesky home invaders were in fact a hive of busy honeybees. And judging by the size of the comb that was now visible through the brick, this was likely going to be the largest, possibly the toughest pest removal job of David's life. He removed layer after layer of brick, knocking out 2 whole rows in just a few minutes. But the more brick he removed, the larger the hives seemed to be, and by the time David had removed 5 rows of bricks, he realized just how big it really was. When the entire hive was finally revealed, David couldn't believe his eyes. It was absolutely massive, forcing the kitchen window above it. According to David, it was the single largest honeycomb he had ever seen. Inspecting the buzzing hive more closely, they had noticed that it contained 13 capped queen cells, each containing a future queen bee. It was clear to David that this hive of bee wasn't just incredibly active, it was driving to the left. There were a few clusters of deceased bees, and David presumed this was the result of the pesticides he and the family had used, but those chemicals had no chance of devouring off such a large colony. Though the bees were surely a nuisance, David knew that it would be wrong to exterminate them, as it would only add to the staggering amount of bee demises occurring across the globe. So, David decided to remove the hive piece by piece and to relocate the piece to a more suitable home. After he had removed several chunks of honeycomb, David noticed that a large section was just a convoluted mess of curves and tunnels. He jokingly said that it seemed as though the bees responsible for building the comb in that section of the hive had been entropy influence of LSD at the time, and despite the fact that David was destroying their home, the honeybees were oddly cooperative. Even though he was taking away their queens, some of the bees even clustered on David's shoulder as he worked. Once the combs were all removed, David cleaned up the area, not surprisingly ripping open a brick wall. David decided to place a box inside of the hole in case any of the worker bees might have been frightened off by the commotion, and decided to return later when things quieted down. After all, no hive is complete without its workers. With the hive safely removed, David planned to deliver the bees to a number of honey farms in the area. He hopes to help local beekeepers, who are currently dealing with colony losses because though bees may get a bad rap, they are in the central part of global agriculture. So, before you go swatting a bee that gets a little too close for comfort, just remember these are our friends. What would you do if you found a hive that big in your wall?